for analysis and advocacy in the area of telecommunications, media, digital rights, economic and energy policy. He's provided expert testimony in more than 250 cases for public interest clients, including attorneys general, people's counsel, and citizen interveners before state and federal agencies, courts, and legislators in almost 40 jurisdictions in the United States and Canada. A Yale University PhD, a Fulbright Fellow, and author of numerous books and articles. Welcome, Mr. Mark Cooper, and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to offer the consumer perspective on rising gasoline prices. American gasoline consumers are fed up, mad as hell, and they have good reason to be. Over the past 5 years, the average household expenditure for gasoline has increased by over $1,000. A major cause of this immense increase is the failure of federal antitrust authorities to prevent the abuse of market power by oil companies and the failure of the administration and Congress to enact policies to address the problems that plague the gasoline market. Between January of this year and the first week in May, gasoline prices increased about 80 cents per gallon. Over 60 cents was the result of an increase in the amount taken by domestic refining and marketing. In the past 5 years, the increase in price paid to domestic refining and marketing has cost consumers over $130 billion. Consumers believe that gasoline prices are unreasonable and that there is something the administration and Congress can do about it, and our analysis shows they are right. The domestic refining sector has become so concentrated that these price increases represent the abuse of market power in the industry. The merger wave of the past decade dramatically reduced the number of refineries and companies in the wholesale market. As a result, the vast majority of markets in the U.S. are concentrated. Lacking competitive pressures, the industry has failed to expand refinery capacity adequately and to dramatically reduce the amount of gasoline in storage. This makes markets vulnerable to price surges even when routine maintenance is conducted, not to mention unexpected events. The companies put up prices, blame supply and demand, but they are the cause of the supply side problem. With prices rising faster than costs, net income in U.S. refining has increased sharply, far faster than in foreign refining. Oil companies' profits have increased far more than profits at comparable U.S. non-oil companies, setting records in 3 of the last 4 years. Excess profits in the past 4 years exceed $200 billion. The increase in cash flow is so great that the industry cannot absorb it, so it is throwing off huge quantities of cash. Stock buybacks, debt reduction, dividends, and huge piles of cash. Net new investment has been paltry compared to the growth of net income, especially in domestic refining. This is great for their Wall Street performance, but it's bad news for Main Street America. This industry has all of the characteristics of market failure. Basic structural conditions of low elasticity of demand and supply, concentration, and barriers to entry. Conduct including lockstep pricing, conscious parallelism in which each of the individuals mutually reinforces the other. Bad management, so bad that they can't even handle routine maintenance without interrupting supply and putting prices up. And finally, performance. High prices, excess profits, underinvestment, and the inability to absorb cash flow. This is a picture of fundamental market failure. The pain felt by consumers is ultimately the result of a policy failure at every level. Antitrust officials approved too many mergers and imposed weak conditions on those that went through so that they could not discipline market power. Congress and the administration have stood idly by and done nothing to help consumers. We believe that to address the short-term problem of price spikes, we need a strategic refinery reserve and a strategic product reserve that are dedicated to ensuring we have excess capacity sufficient to discipline pricing abuse. We need antitrust authorities that really do their job and look very closely at unilateral actions that raise prices. We need authority to make sure they can look at those kinds of behaviors. We need commodity market regulators who look at all the markets. And we need joint federal-state task forces to oversee both the physical and financial markets. So we have more eyeballs with different perspectives overseeing this vital energy commodity. To address long-term problems, we need fundamental changes in supply and demand. We have to accelerate the day when we will use less oil by setting aggressive, concrete targets for reducing American oil consumption, above all, increasing CAFE standards. We need a national policy that promotes the research, production, and use of biofuels in a socially and environmentally responsible manner. Now is the time to act. 6 years ago was the time to act. Hopefully, the current round of spikes, which has gotten everybody's attention, will finally convince policymakers to take some measures that alleviate the pain that Americans have been suffering at the pump. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Because of time constraints, we are going to call on Attorney General Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut as the next witness. He's advocated reforms in the health insurance industry, has fought unfair utility rate charges, has led the fight against big tobacco in terms of their deceptive marketing aimed at children, has investigated insurance industry abuses, and in other previous public services, was the administrative assistant to United States Senator Abe Ribicoff, aide to former United States Senator Daniel Moynihan, and was a law clerk to the Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun. He has also worked with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, has served in the Connecticut House of Representatives, and we're delighted that his schedule would permit him to join us for this important hearing before the Antitrust Task Force today. We welcome you, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to be before you and have long admired the great work that you have done in the consumer area and so many other areas where I have observed the many contributions that you've made, and so I'm particularly honored to be here before you.
Thank you.
And particularly so on this subject, which concerns consumers as much or more than any. I have found that there is none that angers and outrages the consumers of the country more, and with great reason, than this one, precisely because of the statistics that you have just heard from Mr. Cooper, which are so compelling and persuasive as to the need for fundamental change. This market is not just failed, it's dysfunctional. And it overpowers consumers and causes abuses, enables those abuses in a way that virtually none other in the country today. As I was driving here from the airport, I thought back to a meeting that I had with the United States Attorney General less than a year ago, involving a number of my colleagues from all around the country, both Republican and Democrat attorneys general, who met with him and the chairman of the FTC with the single purpose of persuading them to begin a federal investigation. And unfortunately, our plea went unheeded then. There has been no effective federal investigation. We pleaded with Attorney General Gonzalez and FTC Chairman Majoris Platt to begin an investigation of the oil industry, and we offered our partnership in that work. All 50 attorneys general have a task force investigating monopolistic abuses on the part of the oil industry, but we lack the authorities and expertise and resources of the federal government, and so we beseeched the federal government to join with us in that investigation, and so far they have declined to do so. There is a need to provide greater authority, but also to use that authority effectively to enforce the law. The law without enforcement is dead letter. And so as we review what can be done to change the law, I think at the top of the priorities ought to be the kinds of demands that you've made, Mr. Chairman, and other members of the committee and Congress, that the Justice Department be more aggressive and vigorous in enforcing these laws that protect against antitrust and consumer abuses. I'm here to strongly support the legislation that you have proposed that would enable antitrust enforcement against OPEC. By an accident of interpretation in the federal courts, we lack that authority now, but there is no clearer instance of monopolistic pricing than on the part of those OPEC countries. And if they were entities in any way within the reach of law, there would be no question that they were breaking our laws and doing business in the United States. And so I strongly support that measure. I also believe that we ought to have as a remedy under the antitrust laws the potential to break up the big oil companies if they abuse their market power. Clearly, there's a concentration of power. I know my colleague, Mr. Felmy, differs on that point. He says that there is robust competition, no concentration of power. I think there's virtual unanimity among economists that there is a concentration of power. Indeed, I have fought it, for example, the ExxonMobil merger, and the statistics support that view overwhelmingly. The question really is what to do about it, whether they're capable of using that power wisely or whether they need to be policed and stopped from abusing it. And I think they have clearly demonstrated that they will abuse it unless antitrust authorities apply the laws with the potential remedy of breaking up some of the concentration. I also support in my testimony, and I won't go through every detail because it is in the testimony, and I would simply ask for permission to make it a part of the record, a one-year moratorium on any future mergers, a prohibition against any oil company merger in a highly concentrated market unless there is a showing by the FTC that there's a benefit to consumers, a series of steps to expand refinery capacity and product inventory levels, which are a vital weak point in the system now, a series of measures including banning zone pricing, which divides geographic turf. The big oil companies divide that turf, deciding what consumers can pay in different geographic areas, and through their agreements with franchisees, enforce those kinds of rules on them. And finally, I strongly support measures relating to conservation, alternative fuels, essentially to reduce the dependency and, as it's called, addiction to big oil. And I think that, again, to close where Mr. Cooper did, there is a need, as Mr. Felmy says, to avoid doing harm. First, do no harm. But the point here is that there can be no more egregious harm than to watch prices rise at the pump 50 cents higher than last year at this time when crude is lower, $7 a barrel lower. That is an outrage, and consumers are rightly angry about it, and I hope that the Congress will give states and state attorneys general some of the measures that I think can help us overcome it. Thank you.